The Élysée Palace has seen everything. Kings have walked its halls. Queens have dined beneath its chandeliers. Prime ministers, presidents, and generals have sat at its tables and shaped the course of history. But on the night of May 23, 2026, something happened inside those golden walls that no political analyst predicted, no tennis journalist anticipated, and no one, absolutely no one, saw coming. The president of France, Emmanuel Macron, cleared his schedule, sent a presidential limousine to a four-star hotel, and waited until nearly midnight to have a private dinner with a 20-year-old tennis player from Manila. And what he offered her behind those closed doors didn't just shake the WTA, it shook the world. Let that sink in for a second. The president of France doesn't invite tennis players to private dinners. He doesn't send diplomatic vehicles to pick up athletes. He doesn't sit for 3 hours with a young woman from the Philippines and ask about her journey, her dreams, her people. That's not how world leaders operate. And yet, that is exactly what Emmanuel Macron did. The Filipino diaspora is calling it validation. The WTA is calling it unprecedented. And Alexandra Eala, the girl at the center of all of it, is calling it the most surreal night of her entire life. So, what actually happened? Let's get into it. Paris, France, May 23, 2026. The City of Light was already glowing with a different kind of electricity. Roland Garros was hours away from beginning its main draw. The grounds were buzzing, qualifiers wrapping up, practice sessions running late into the evening, the quiet, electric anticipation that only a Grand Slam can generate. The season's second major was about to begin, and the tennis world was holding its breath. But for thousands of Filipino fans who had flooded into Paris from across Europe, across Asia, across every corner of the globe, the tournament had already started the moment Alexandra Eala's flight touched down on French soil. The welcome she received at the airport was unlike anything Roland Garros had ever witnessed surrounding a 38th-ranked player. Flags, chants, tears, thousands of Filipinos pressing against barriers, screaming her name, holding signs painted in red, white, blue, and yellow. Security had to be doubled. The noise was deafening, and Alexandra Eala, who had seen this before, in Rome, in Madrid, in every city where the Filipino diaspora had gathered to cheer her on, still looked overwhelmed, still looked moved. Because no matter how many times it happens, there is something about seeing your people, your community, choose to love you that never gets old. In the days before the tournament, she had already been honored beyond what most players experience during a Grand Slam. She practiced on Court 7 at Roland Garros. She sat down with the president of the French Tennis Federation. She was presented with a medal, and the tournament hadn't even started yet. For Alexandra Eala, Paris already felt like a victory before a single ball had been struck in anger. But behind the smiles, behind the grace and the gratitude, she was exhausted. The flight from Mallorca had been long. The media obligations had been relentless. The weight of 40,000 fans and the expectations of an entire nation pressed down on her shoulders like something physical, something she could feel with every step. By the time evening fell on May 23rd, she had ordered room service, stepped into a hot shower, and was preparing to fall into bed. She had a match the next day. She needed rest. She needed quiet. And then her phone buzzed. The message was from her agent. 4 words that made no sense at that hour. Don't go to sleep. Someone is coming to see you. Alex frowned at her screen. It was nearly midnight. Who comes to see someone at midnight on the eve of the French Open? She pulled on a sweater, ran a brush through her hair, and waited. 15 minutes later, her phone buzzed again. This time, just 5 words. Come downstairs. Alone. The lobby of the Hotel de Crillon was quiet in a way that only expensive hotels can be at midnight. That particular hush of marble floors and low lighting and the distant sound of the city breathing outside. The concierge nodded as she passed. The security guard held the door. And there, idling at the curb in the cool Paris night, was a vehicle that stopped her in her tracks. A black limousine,
tinted windows, diplomatic plates, and on the door, unmistakable, the official seal of the French Republic. The door opened from the inside. A figure in a dark suit leaned forward. "Miss Eala, please get in. The president is waiting." Alex Eala stood on the pavement of Paris, the night air on her face, and felt her heart completely stop. The president of France, Emmanuel Macron, waiting for her, at midnight, at the Élysée Palace. She looked back at the hotel, at the lights still on in her mother's room on the upper floor, at the glittering skyline of a city that had already given her so much. She thought of the flags, she thought of the chants, she thought of the Eala effect, that phrase the media had coined, that movement she had never asked for and could not escape. And then she stepped into the limousine. The door closed, the engine hummed, and Alex Eala, the 20-year-old from Manila who had never won a single match at Roland Garros, was driven through the empty streets of Paris toward the most famous address in France. She had no idea that the conversation waiting for her at the other end of that ride was about to change everything. The Élysée Palace has stood at the heart of French power for over 300 years. It has hosted emperors and prime ministers, dignitaries and diplomats, moments of triumph and moments of crisis. But on this particular night, the guards at the Iron Gate were expecting only one guest, not a head of state, not a foreign dignitary, a tennis player from Manila. The limousine passed through the gates and rolled into a courtyard that was lit in soft gold, the flags of France rippling gently in the night breeze, the usual bustle of advisors and security personnel reduced to an almost reverent silence. It was as if the palace itself understood that something different was happening tonight.
A uniformed attendant opened the car door. "Bienvenue, Miss Eala." She stepped out onto the cobblestones, her heels clicking against the stone, dressed for a hotel room, not a state dinner. A senior aide met her at the entrance and led her inside, speaking in a calm, measured tone. "The president is waiting for you in the Salon des Fêtes. He has been looking forward to this all evening." The Salon des Fêtes is not a room designed for intimacy. It is a room designed for power. Crystal chandeliers that catch the light and throw it across frescoed ceilings. Long tables set with gold-rimmed china. The kind of room that reminds you, the moment you walk in, exactly who is in charge. It is where heads of state gather for official banquets, where history is made over wine and white tablecloths. But when Alex Eala pushed open those doors, she did not find a long table filled with dignitaries. She found one small table, set for two, and at the head of it, rising from his chair and crossing the room with his hand extended, was Emmanuel Macron. "Alex," he said, and his voice was warm, unhurried, nothing like the polished formality of a press conference. "Thank you for coming. I know it's late. I know you have a match tomorrow, but I couldn't let you begin this tournament without telling you something." She shook his hand, somehow managed to say, "Mr. President, I'm honored." He smiled. "The honor is mine. Please, sit." And so there they were, the president of France and the tennis player from Manila, sitting across from each other in one of the most powerful rooms in Europe, while the rest of Paris slept outside. A server appeared, poured water, arranged silverware, then disappeared as silently as he had come, and Macron studied her for a long moment before he spoke. "I watched your matches in Rome," he said, "not just the tennis, the way your people love you, the flags, the chants, the tears in the stands." He paused, letting that settle. "I have been in politics for decades. I have seen movements build. I have seen leaders rise. But I have never, not once, seen anything quite like what you have created." He held her gaze. "They call it the Eala effect. But it's not an effect, Alex. It's a revolution. And France wants to be part of it." Whatever Alex Eala had been expecting when she climbed into that limousine, it was not this. She asked what he meant, and what came next was something that no one outside that room had yet heard. Macron reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small folder on the table between them. He explained, carefully and clearly, that this was not just a dinner invitation. This was something far larger.
He was inviting her to serve as a cultural ambassador, not for France, but for the Filipino community in France, for the hundreds of thousands of OFWs, the overseas Filipino workers who had built their lives on French soil, the nurses working double shifts in Paris hospitals, the caregivers in Lyon, the engineers in Bordeaux, the men and women who had left everything behind for their families and who had for so long felt invisible, unseen, uncelebrated. And then he slid the folder across the table. Inside was a formal proposal, a cultural exchange program between France and the Philippines, funded directly by the French government. It would provide scholarships for young Filipino athletes to train in France, to study at elite academies, to follow the very path that Eala had blazed herself when she packed her bags for the Rafa Nadal Academy in Spain as a teenager with nothing but talent and belief. The program was already designed. The funding was already committed. The French government was already on board. There was just one thing missing, a name, and Macron had already chosen it. The Alex Eala Scholarship, he said, a legacy that will outlast any trophy. For a long moment she didn't move. Her hand slowly rose to her mouth. Her eyes glistened. The folder sat between them on the table, slim, elegant, stamped with the seal of the French Republic, and it felt, in that moment, like it weighed more than anything she had ever lifted. She finally found her voice. "Mr. President," she whispered, "I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever imagined." Macron didn't rush, didn't push. He simply nodded and said, "You don't have to say anything. Not tonight. The offer is on the table. It will still be there after the French Open, after the grass season, after the U.S. Open. There is no deadline, no pressure. This is not a political negotiation. It is an invitation."
He went on to explain what he meant by that. He wasn't asking her to become a politician. He wasn't asking her to endorse his party or appear at campaign events or say things she didn't believe. He was asking her to simply keep being Alex Eala. Keep fighting. Keep waving that flag. Keep making her people feel seen. Because the scholarship program would exist whether she accepted or not. The French government was committed to supporting the Filipino community regardless. But having her name on it, that meant something different entirely. That told every young Filipino kid staring at a tennis ball or a football or a pair of running shoes that their dreams were not too big, that France believed in them, that the world was watching. She looked down at her hands. They were trembling. "I never asked for this," she said quietly. "I never asked to be a symbol. I just wanted to play tennis." And Macron smiled, gently, and said something that stopped her cold. "The best ones never do. Nelson Mandela didn't ask to be a symbol. Mother Teresa didn't ask to be a saint. The world chooses you, Alex, and the world has chosen you. The question is not whether you are ready. The question is whether you will accept the responsibility that comes with it." After that, something shifted in the room. The weight of the formal proposal lifted, and what replaced it was something warmer, more human. Macron set the conversation aside and simply asked about her life, her family, her journey from Manila to Mallorca to Paris, and Eala, who had been sitting across from the President of France in a historic palace at 1 in the morning, somehow found herself laughing, actually laughing, as she described her first weeks at the Rafa Nadal Academy, barely speaking a word of Spanish, figuring out laundry machines and grocery stores, and loneliness for the first time in her life. Macron listened and laughed with her, and then told her that it wasn't so different from his own story, leaving his hometown of Amiens for Paris as a young man, knowing no one, having nothing except a belief that hard work could be enough. "You have that same belief," he told her. "Never lose it."